I cannot thank you guys enough for joining me for another episode of The Next Chapter with Tiffany. I am very excited to bring you another collaboration with Dr. Becky Wolery. And Dr. Becky, if you remember, is a licensed clinical social worker and psychologist. She has 3 clinics within the Treasure Valley area and also has a YouTube channel called Dear Dr. Becky. So make sure after you like and subscribe to my YouTube channel that you run on over to Dear Dr. Becky's YouTube channel and you subscribe to that one as well. We want to be able to grow our stuff separately and also to be able to continue to grow our content together when we collaborate. I want to put out there, guys, that we are actually diving a little bit deeper this time into the shame category. We decided we wanted to really go next level on this. And just a bit of a trigger warning, of course, anybody that's dealing with any type of past traumas. I don't want to give too much away, but just FYI, there's some pretty heavy topics within this particular series. The first one that you're going to watch today is not as deep as the next 2, and this will be 3-part series. Just want to put that out there to always protect you and think of you, because the last thing I want to do is have somebody be triggered and actually end up doing more harm than good. So thank you guys once again for all of the feedback and all the support. Remember to go onto our YouTube channels and subscribe so we can continue to grow. Thank you so much. Welcome back, my friend. How are you?
I am so good. Thank you. It's good to
Yes.
see you and everybody
Good.
else.
Yeah, good to have you back. And I'm so grateful that you're willing to sit here and talk to little old me. What I want to do first off is I would like you to remind us of what your credentials are and your experience, please.
Yeah, I love that you asked me that because, especially my experience, I've had the opportunity for over a decade to work with individuals in a counseling session as a licensed clinical social worker and a psychologist, and be able to hear the powerful stories that they tell me about their experiences with the topic we're talking about right now. So, I just think this is so important because it is just reoccurring over and over again in our society, and especially with our youth and young adults. And
Yeah.
I'm just really impassioned about this topic. So thank you for having me here.
Oh, absolutely. And just to reiterate, you and I had a discussion previously about shame,
Yeah.
and we both thought, you know what, we need to dive deeper into this and from your perspective and your expertise in this subject, and then of course me being a person with a real world experience with the subject of shame and traumatic shame and all of that. So I'm very grateful that we're able to really dive deeper. And once again, we want to put out a disclaimer for a bit of a trigger warning. I already mentioned it previously, but I want to mention it again that this is a topic that is really profound and could actually trigger somebody that has some traumatic experiences. And so we just want to put that out there.
Yeah, thank you. And I think you said it beautifully. It's a difficult topic, no doubt, but it's such an important topic. I just wish everybody was listening to this podcast because more than anything, I want it to be an opportunity for people to be able to have a voice, for people to especially be able to start healing. That is really my goal. So I encourage you to listen to this and to share it with people that really potentially could need this. And honestly, share it with all of the youth and young adults. There's going to be some great stuff here, Tiffany, that
Yeah,
can really help protect our youth and our young adults, and our older adults too, right? Because we can all get
right.
caught in these
Absolutely.
situations.
Yes, yes, and that is a fact. It's definitely a widespread thing. There's no age limit on this. There's no boundaries on it. Shame and trauma and guilt, all of those do not care who you are, what age you are, what color you are, your background. It doesn't matter. So it affects millions of people, obviously, across this whole world. So it's global, and
Mhm.
the getting the tools to try to start healing, getting some thoughts and ideas, sharing other stories with people that you might go, oh my gosh, that's common ground, and whether it be something that's based in trauma in childhood or based in something that happened when you're adult, there's that common ground, and being able to talk with those people and share that is all part of that healing journey. So it's very important.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So let's start at the root of this. So when we talk about shame, again, we like we mentioned in the previous episode, you think of shame, sometimes you don't understand what exactly it is. So from your perspective, could you please tell us, what is shame?
Yeah, it's so different because it could be guilt, right? Some people think of it as guilt, regret, blame. They're all interrelated, but they're all different. And shame is especially um, a very painful emotion because it's the idea and the belief that I am bad. Not that I just did something bad. It's identity based. It whispers to us, there's something
Mm,
wrong with you. And that is really what makes it so toxic. It's not just, I did something wrong or I shouldn't have done
right.
that. And I have some regret about some of the choices I made. But shame attacks yourself, who you are, which affects you massively, your self worth, your self esteem, your self identity. It encompasses shame when we are looking at things from feeling that we are bad, that there's
Yeah,
something really wrong with us. It's powerful and so very harmful.
absolutely. And the whole idea of being unworthy, and
Mhm.
and that you are completely what you're not, and that belief, that visual that you just gave me of that whispering in the ear of the
Mhm.
nonstop, you're not good enough, you're unworthy, whatever those horrible toxic words are, and
Yeah.
you believe that.
Yeah, shame is right. It becomes your identity and who you think you are, and the guilt says I did something wrong. Right? Guilt
Mm,
says I did something wrong, so I feel guilty about what I did. Sometimes guilt can be beneficial, and sometimes it's not. Right?
mm,
If we truly recognize when guilt is beneficial, we can see, yeah, I need to make a change. So yeah, I did something wrong. I need to make a change. So guilt can be positive. Guilt can also be negative.
mm,
But regret is basically saying, I wish I made a different choice. And I think that's really common with shame because sometimes the choice we make, even though there was no intention to do something bad or wrong, or we still can regret when we have negative outcomes, right? When the
mm,
outcome is not what we expected, therefore we regret that. And that's
yeah,
normal. We would, of course, we're going to regret being somewhere doing something that didn't turn out right. Somehow then we blame ourselves for that
mm.
situation, and then that's where then the shame seems to kick in next, right? It attacks ourself for that.
Yeah, it's interesting because it'd be easy to confuse all of those, and guilt, I like what you said, that it can be helpful, because when you do something to hurt somebody, and
Yeah.
then you instantly realize, "Oh, I didn't mean to do that, I'm so sorry." There's
Yeah.
that ability to make amends, and then it sets your heart at ease along with the person that you hurt or did something bad to, and the intention may not have been there. It may have been a knee-jerk reaction, something that boiled up inside, and you just lash out, and then you go, oh my god, okay, I'm sorry, I feel bad that I did that. That's a good
Right.
thing, to have that self check thing of, okay, boom, I shouldn't have done that. But
Yeah.
and then that's not that voice inside, such as shame, saying you're unworthy, you're this, you're horrible, you're blah blah blah. So guilt, I
Yeah.
think, can definitely be checks and balances for sure. But
Yeah.
again, there's the toxic part of it, where people that feel guilty when somebody else has a something that they did or didn't do, or they had a tough life, and, well, why do you feel guilty for somebody else doing wrong? Or,
Mm.
it's just, I grew up with that, and
Mhm.
it's a tough thing to try to figure out why. So that leads to my next question: is, why do you think, in your professional opinion, uh, that we tend to turn inward and do that self-attack, and the inability to self-regulate and say, okay, I'm not packing this around with me, and I am worthy? I mean, the difference between those people that allow, and I'm not saying that they freely allow, but they allow that to come in and take over, as opposed to people that are just like, I'm not taking that. I'm not packing that around. What do you see in the difference with that?
Yeah, that's an interesting question because sometimes it is a combination of nature nurture, right? Sometimes it's our personality. Sometimes some people can just let things go and not take on that responsibility, right? Not own it. And that's a powerful, powerful ability. I don't see it real commonly, frankly, especially in women. And
Mm,
that's wonderful when they can. And especially when it's reinforced, right, by our society. That's the nature versus nurture. It can get reinforced by our society. So maybe it's a personality. Maybe the person is a little more quiet, a little more reserved, and so, and just, I always say peacemakers, they make the world go round, but peacemakers oftentimes feel like they get taken advantage of really easy because they are quiet and they are reserved. So that, of course, is the, nature part of it. And the nurturing part is our environment. And our environment can reinforce these negative feelings and thoughts that we have. So there's a combination. And then, of course, when we go through situations, right, and we feel and experience blame or shame, we have to recognize that even years after the situations have passed, that shame actually gets stored in the nervous system.
mm,
So it's not just in the mind. It is, the body feels the shame is actually a book. Body feels the trauma, the shame. I'm trying to think of what the title of, but
mm,
very powerful, powerful book, because it does help us to understand how it's stored in the nervous system. It's not just in the mind. It's
yeah.
all tied to memory and emotion, how we see ourselves. And so it just will fester there in silence until we bring it to light, until we start
Mm,
dealing with it, until we do something about it. It's so difficult. And that's why it can go on for years, decades,
yeah.
decades even
Yeah.
decades. So it's so important for people to bring it to light, to talk about it, to work through it, to get the help that they need. And it can be help, it can be talking to people, it can be a variety of different things, right? But getting the power out of shame is so important,
Yeah.
because it takes the power away from us.
Interesting. It is. It's fascinating how we store things in our body and
Yeah.
how that can live for many, many years and wreak havoc mentally, physically,
Oh,
emotionally, all the above until you face it and maybe
mhm.
acknowledge it, or you may not even know what it is. So that
Right.
being said, what are some ways the trauma that we pack around, especially something like a sexual abuse situation, how does that create the shame, even though we know innately, we know we did nothing wrong. We did not ask for that. We did not put ourselves in a situation to get abused in that way. Am I making sense with that
Yeah,
question?
yeah. And I love that you said that because I think that's the inner conflict. You mentioned innately, we know we didn't do anything wrong. We didn't
Mhm.
act personally in a wrong way. But sometimes we think because maybe we went somewhere, but we're in that situation that somehow then we are to blame. And so the blame gets directed on ourselves when it really should be on the other person, frankly, in this situation. So it's really a confusing concept. And frankly, when we experience any kind of trauma, our autonomic nervous system is at full height and it confuses the brain. So we're in this state of basically we're irrational because we're in this very confused state. We don't know when someone experiences abuse or manipulation or violation of any kind, and especially if they're young and vulnerable, their brain somehow thinks, somehow I must have caused this, right? How
Mm,
else would this happen? I must have caused this, even if they know I didn't do it, right?
right.
I didn't want this. Their brain is in this trauma response because it's a survival response. It actually tries to make sense of the pain.
Mm,
And somehow, too, it wants to empower us. If somehow I caused this, then I can change it. I can do
mm.
something about it. Therefore, it does become my fault, right? And that creates that self blame pattern. And sadly enough, it creates toxic shame big time.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I've seen it
Yeah,
so many times.
I'm sure. In those situations when shame and trauma actually develop within us, it
Mhm.
is essentially a survival mode reaction, is what you're saying.
Yeah. I mean, there are different ways of looking at it, and you'll hear
Okay.
different experts say things, and there's a lot more I could go into on that. But it really is trying to make sense of the pain, right? Our brain is trying to, like, how did this happen? What happened? What can, how I must have somehow caused it. It makes those assumptions. So there's so much confusion that goes on in the brain when we experience that. The trauma just really confuses the brain. And
Sure.
I think that's important to know that. I think that might have been a little repetitive what I already said, so just feel free to cut
Oh
that
no,
out.
it's fine. It's all
I'm
good
going to go
because
into something
there
I
are
think a
times that
little
my
different,
brain
Tiffany.
bounces and I'll take nuggets and then I'll
Okay,
go, "Oh, let's go back and I want to cover that." So, no, and the repetitive stuff, I think sometimes we need to hear it
hear it more than one
more than
time.
absolutely,
Yeah.
because as you're as you were talking about saying that we develop this with
Hmm.
shame as somewhat of a self-protection, my brain went straight to what happened with me, that it's too heavy, it's too brutal, it's too
Yes.
awful to just say these people were horrible human beings that personally attacked me, took advantage of me. That's too much to bear when that person or these people should have been my protectors, should have actually been there and made me feel safe instead of taking advantage of that. That's too traumatic, too horrible. So the idea of going deep and kind of make a callus over that wound and say, "Oh no, you shouldn't have been there in the first place." And they, I mean, if they wouldn't have done that if you wouldn't have been there, and they wouldn't have done that if this, and they wouldn't have. So I can totally see. The more you spoke, the more I start thinking, "Oh yeah, that's interesting how your brain goes into protection overdrive and says." It's too ugly, it's too brutal, it's too horrible to put the blame on these people that you actually thought that you cared about, and that you thought you respected, that you thought cared and respected you, when they didn't. And so the ugly, raw truth is they didn't give a shit about you at that moment. So it's easier to go into protection mode. So I totally just developed all of that right when you were
Wow.
talking.
That's powerful, Tiffany.
Yeah.
That's
Yep.
amazing. I mean, and what a great example of exactly what I was talking about. It really does go into protection mode. And when you think about it, in that moment, your life is flipped upside down. And as you said, these are people that you should have been able to trust, right?
Yep.
So thank you for sharing what was going on in your head and how you felt, because that is exactly what I hear over and over again. Many times there are situations where people will say, well, I probably should not have trusted because I'd heard of this thing. And so then, of course, in those situations, they even blame themselves even more. Um, and that's
Sure.
really unfortunate, because actually trust is such an important trait and characteristics that we need to have to function well in our society. So
Yeah.
being a trusting person is not a negative. I think so many people say, I shouldn't have trusted, I shouldn't have trusted, I shouldn't have trusted. I'm like, wait, no, you should. They shouldn't have done something to take
Exactly. They
advantage.
violated you.
That's right.
And so yeah, and it's so sad when, and I have had trust issues my whole life, and it started before that too. So it wasn't anything that is what drew me into that instantly. Just it wasn't. I already had trust issues. Then that would stem from childhood, but that's what is so awful, is it takes that out of you. So then it affects every relationship that you have from that day forward, or from childhood forward, whatever time frame it happened to you, or if there were multiple. Because when
Sure.
you're that person that is in that mode where you've already been taken advantage of, that you're sometimes that makes you an easier target, and it could be this repetitive thing over and over. And then it's interesting when I think about myself with so many trust issues, how is it that you end up repeating a cycle of getting back in situations where you're in relationships over and over with people that are untrustworthy? When you think of somebody with trust issues, you think, "Oh, I'm just going to close myself off from the world and I will no longer have to deal with anything, let alone care about anybody, because I don't trust anyone, and then I don't get taken advantage of and pack around the shame and the trauma forever." So it's this crazy dichotomy, this crazy cycle, to and without going off on the rails off on that, it's important that we work on that
Oh,
we
yeah.
want, my goal is to have healthy relationships and meaning with my partner. And I don't really have that issue with my friends, obviously, because there's decades of building that. And
Mhm.
so there's always been trust there. I've got new friends that there it's because of the age that we're at and the life lessons and where we are in our mental and emotional state that it's easier to develop adult female relationships. But the same pattern over and over of the mistrust of my partner because of these things that I've been through is something that I'm always working on, and I want to have that healthy relationship, and I'm at a good level now. But
Good. Good for
yeah,
you.
thank you. And I
Good
again,
for
I
you.
apologize for going off on that a little bit, but I want, like you said earlier, I want more than anything to help other people, other
Mm.
women that have
Yeah.
been through these situations, and to be able for between my life lessons and things I've discovered and your expertise and the things that you've experienced with what, treating other people, that we can bring to the table is important to me, and I know what it's important to you. So
Mhm.
pardon me, audience, if Tiffany goes off every now and
You're
then.
good. You have a story to tell that is so important to tell. And you said some really important things just now that are very, very powerful. I will tell you, side note, trust is a big thing. And I love if we further explore that in another episode.
Yeah.
It is something that is a constant issue in everybody I work with. So let's take a side note and work
Okay.
on that as one of ours.
We're
Okay.
developing a episode for trust, so
Oh
hang on,
gosh,
folks, because it's
yes.
coming. So,
It's coming. That's
so
right.
when
Um,
when we talk, oh, go ahead. No,
oh
no,
no,
go ahead.
I was gonna say I loved how you described the dichotomy because that is absolutely correct. That is really what happens with so many people, and you can see how come and why. And I wanted to add that this is so many stories. Part of the reason I reached out to you and I said, hey, we need to do a little follow up about shame specifically related to trauma. Because the very next week after I met with you, it was even probably the next day, I literally had 3 people in my office that were all talking about situations in which they were experiencing sexual trauma, sexual abuse, manipulation, coercion, and they were saying all the classic things. And there's so many situations in what this can occur right now. When you mentioned that somehow you would think I would just keep myself out of those situations, right? And I would be more aware. But you're right. It actually is oftentimes the opposite. One person I even worked with, after this happened to her, she started associating love with this. This is the only way that people will ever love me, that this is what I'm good for, right? This is the only way I'm going to get attention or anybody that's going to be part of my life. It is only about who I am sexually. And
Mm,
that is really a common theme that I've seen so many times. And so that becomes their identity. The other thing is they somehow feel like they've been ruined and nobody else will want them. And
mm,
it comes down to self-worth so much that I'm not worthy for somebody else. Nobody's going to want me now. And so they, in a sense, allow themselves to be in these other situations because they don't think they're of worth for anybody else. They think other people they would want to maybe have a relationship would just reject them because of what has happened to them.